this, we can do that as well. Hey guys, we want to welcome you guys for joining us to have this. We just lost Erica just like that. Okay, she could have accidentally clicked the button, but we want to welcome you guys and we want to thank you guys for joining us. We're having these very special talks. We've been having for the last couple of weeks, and this week we have been focusing on mental health. On Tuesday at 6:30, we talked about, what are some ways that we can identify stress and what are some ways that we can cope with it. And it was really helpful. And I got a lot of really good feedback of different people telling me, hey, that was really helpful. And today we're talking about another important topic. We're talking about depression. I see Jessica's already tuning in. Good to have you, Jessica. She was one of our presenters Tuesday. And tonight we have Vanessa and Erica joining us. And I want them to, give a little shout out to you guys real quick. Say hi, everybody.
Hey, y'all.
Let me see. I didn't lose Vanessa, did I? I think she kind of froze.
Where'd she go?
We may have to bring her back in. And this happened to us a little bit last week. And if you're just tuning in, or if you're joining us, you know how it is with technology. And this happens sometimes. Things happen, and many of us are probably zoomed out of all the Zoom meetings. Right. But we want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we're going to get into the conversation in just a little bit. And we want you guys to know and to keep in mind that we want this to be a dialogue. If there's things or points that you agree in the conversation that really spoke to you, please feel free to comment on this on there and let us know, hey, man, that I totally agree with that. Or in the end, or while we're discussing, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in. We want to make sure that we dialogue with you, that we may get some time to answer your questions. I see Juan. Juan is in the house. Welcome, Juan. Good to have you, man. And like I said, this is a very important talk. We're going to be talking about depression. But at this time, I'm going to go ahead and give a little introduction to my two good friends, Eric and Vanessa. We met at Andrews University a few years back. Mainly, I met them through my wife. They were in some of the same school departments, counseling, school counselors. And we hung out a couple of times. And so I want to make sure to introduce them to you guys. And Erica, okay, tell us a little bit. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'm going to introduce you, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So Erica lives in Maryland. Okay, Erica lives in Maryland, and she's a psychologist for Boys Town. And before you tell us a little bit about what you like or don't like about your profession being in the mental health, I have to point this out. Erica and I, one of the things that stands out for me with Erica is, I don't know if you were with me, but we went to go get tacos, or we were talking about eating tacos, and Erica said the following phrase, and I remember to this day, and I use it to this day.
What you gonna say?
I said, Erica, you like tacos? And you looked at me and you said, Ray, tacos are life-changing.
They are life-changing, though, guys. They're like the best thing ever.
And to this day, I still use that phrase. When people say stuff like that. I'm like, hey, man, that's life-changing right there. And as a pastor, you can see how I appreciate that comment. But anyways, I have Erica, and then tell us a little bit. Well, let me introduce Vanessa as well. Vanessa, you just moved to Toronto not too long ago, and
yes,
and so you have your own mental health consulting business, which I think is awesome. I think it's great. And you're a psychotherapist, and you're also, another thing that we have in common is that you and like me and Alyssa, you're in the pastoral ministry couple thing. Your husband's a pastor. And so that's another thing that we have in common that you may understand more than other. We all understand a little bit. And I'm going to ask you guys the same question. Tell me a little bit about what you guys like or maybe dislike, or maybe there isn't anything you dislike. Maybe you just love what you do in your career. And then tell me what you love or dislike about Maryland and your example, Erica, and then Vanessa about Toronto. And I know Toronto maybe is not your home, but you're there now. Maybe tell me what you're liking about it so far, or maybe tell me about Canada for those of us who are in the U.S. I don't know, something for us to get to know you a little bit. Go ahead, Erica.
All right. Well, I love my job. I'm like a psychologist. I work with younger kids. I kind of focused my practice in on working with adolescents and children and families. I work in really high risk, high poverty areas. So I'm dealing with a lot of kids who are experiencing trauma like right now and are here and now like every single day. So there's drive-bys, there's murders, there are things that are going on in their everyday life that is just normal for them. But like I absolutely love it. I guess if there was any low point is that like there is such thing as fatigue. So you can become fatigued when you're dealing with like such high trauma on an everyday basis where it almost becomes your normal. So just differentiating yourself from like the trauma that you have to go into work and then like the life that you have to live as well. I moved to Maryland about 3 years ago. Going on 3 years ago. Maryland's cool. I mean, it's not California, but it's cool. I'm right next. I'm right next to DC, so I'm living my best life. You know.
I hear you, and I got people. We got little Angie's in the house. Jessica, Alyssa, tacos are life changing. Jessica agrees. Jessica mentioned La Perla. For those of you who don't know about La Perla,
Yes.
Perla.
yeah, La
Oh.
Perla is life. If you're ever in Michigan, La Perla is the spot. Best Mexican food. Like to this day, the chile. Well, anyways, I'm getting hungry just talking about it. Jessica's excited because you're mentioning California, and you know that got Jessica excited a little bit. All right, Vanessa, tell us a little bit.
Well, I just moved. I moved to Toronto like maybe 5 months ago or so. But I was in Illinois, so I was in the States for 6 years. And that was awesome. We were all in Michigan, but then I went to Illinois and I started working. And just like Erica, I was working with younger kids. I was working in a residential center, treatment center for kids who have various mental illnesses. And I was working as a therapist, and that was interesting. And it was also a wonderful experience. I treated it like a ministry for me. It was just a way to give back to my community, like the gifts that God has given me, to use that to help people take care of themselves from a mental health perspective. So I was there for 3.5 years. Then I moved to Toronto. And moving to Toronto is something else. At first, I felt like, you know what, it's in North America, so it's not going to be much different. But boy, I tell you, when I moved here, it's like a whole different place.
Wow.
The currency, first of all, is different, and the people are awesome, and people are nice here in Toronto. I really like them. Everyone is looking out for your best interest. And then also, when it came on to me getting into the whole mix of working, that was a tough one for me. And that's where I would say my experience in working in Toronto, it started off a little bit rocky because in Toronto, they do things a little bit different. The whole process of becoming licensed and practicing, it's it's different from the US in a sense. So I was a little bit nervous coming over because I was like, I've had so many years practicing. I really don't want to miss out on that. But you know what? I feel like God just used that as a way for me to rely on Him. And that's what I did. And now things are working out. Things are sorting out. I'm able to start my own business, consulting business, which I'm very excited for. And it's also a way for me to give back to the community that is less fortunate in a sense, that really needs this type of help. So I'm giving praise for that. So that's me.
Hey, thanks for sharing. And I'll have to add to that. Canadian people like are super nice, super friendly. Like, you know, maybe if you're watching, you're like, you hear this, but I remember I went out to go speak at a youth event in Winnipeg, and my friend asked me to go purchase something at the store, right? And for some reason they weren't. I tried to pay with my $20 bill. For some reason they wouldn't take it, and they were just. I think there was something was going on that people were using fake $20 bills, because I was kind of shocked. Like, oh no, it's not you. Sorry, at this moment we're only. And they couldn't take my credit card either. So I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm supposed to pay for this, or it wasn't working. And the lady behind me, like, so kind and so nice, paid for it, but it wasn't like, oh, let me pay so this gang can get out of the way. Like how I feel could have been here in the States, just like, okay, just either get out the way or let me pay, because it was $20. I'm not talking about a $2 thing. She was like happy to do it. She's, oh no, I got you, don't worry. And then I tried to give her the 20, she wouldn't take it, and I was really impressed. I didn't have a negative conception before, but I already feel that they were nice people, but that took it to another level. So that is for sure true.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you guys for joining us. And one of the things I like to point out that you guys both mentioned is that one of the abilities and the blessing it is that not only were you able to get schooling and in this type of work, but you continue to allow God to use you in this ministry, and this today is part of that. I got together with you guys and like, man, this is awesome when we can get together and hopefully make an impact for somebody that may be going through mental health questions, whatever. So I appreciate you guys for joining us. And that goes to those who are listening. If you're thinking, what, how do I use my work? I went to school and I got my professional job. There's ways that God can still use each and every one of you, each and every one of us, to be a blessing to others. Let me go ahead and pray, and then we're gonna go straight into our talk. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this opportunity that we can discuss a very important topic. We ask for your Holy Spirit to guide us, to direct us, speak to us, speak to the people who are listening. May it be, Lord, an opportunity for people to be delivered from some thoughts that the enemy may be having upon them, from any discouragement, anything that may be blocking them from even being closer to you, or relationships, or any strain psychologically, mentally, Lord, that it could be there. Physically, Lord, that anything can happen today. May it be because of your Holy Spirit working and speaking through us. May you be lifted up through all of this, for we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So once again, we're talking about depression. And, one of the things that I like us to talk about, and I know you guys have some things you guys want to mention, but, depression is real, obviously. And I think it's important. And I think maybe even from a church perspective or Christian perspective, maybe we don't talk about it enough, or we should talk more about it. So that's one of the things I was thinking about doing this. But even with that, I realized there's certain stigmas that come with it. There's certain, maybe misconceptions. And I'll be honest, some of them, sometimes I even used to kind of believe myself, whether it was a cultural thing, a Christian perspective viewpoint. But, I think that not only is it real, but I did a little poll with some of my young adults, young people, and I asked the simple question. Excuse me. I asked the question: were they mentally, did they have some mental concerns? Were they mentally impacted during COVID-19? And it was the two options they had was like not really or somewhat, right? And the majority, 90% of the people that responded to this question, and said they were somewhat impacted by this. So maybe people that before it was they were going about life, everything was normal, and then obviously, like the rest of us, things kind of slowed down or took a different turn. Now it's kind of impacted. I saw the news, the tragic news of a doctor in New York who took her own life in the front lines. And that makes you think of things like that. And I've seen other examples of a young person who couldn't bear being at home and took their own life. So not only is this real, but if not talked about more, if not dealt with more, could have devastating consequences, not just on the individual, but to those around us. So I'd like us to start by maybe you guys are going to be the main ones. This is your thing. I'm mainly just here to learn along with everybody else. But give us a definition of depression, and tell us a little bit about things. And along the way, we'll ask some more questions. And like I said, guys, if you're watching, if you're listening, if you have questions, comments, feel free to comment. We love to take those on. So let's start with the definition of it, guys.
Vanessa, you want to start, or you want me to?
You could go, Eric.
Okay. I'll hop off that cliff. So when you look at depression, the first thing you have to know about it, it's like the number one disability in the world. So when you think about depression, you have to think that it's impacting so many people right now in our very here and now. And the definition of it is there's multiple symptoms that can go into it, but it's overall this feeling of lowness, this feeling of sadness that's consecutive for 2 consistent weeks. Now, people can have depressive symptoms that we see over time. So say, for example, something happens and you may be sad for a period of time, but you're able to come out of it. But depression, when you think about clinical depression, this is a depression that kind of lasts. It's consistent. You can't shake it. It doesn't go anywhere. And it's just there with you for about 2 weeks longer or even longer. People can have depressive symptoms their whole life, and that is persistent depressive disorder. And that's just kind of dealing with this overarching sadness, this inability to kind of have any highs in your life. These consistent feelings of self-doubt and suicidal ideations that kind of come in and play into your life that just kind of keeps you, I almost want to say, from experiencing life as a whole. Like, so depression, some of the symptoms that come into it are like a low mood, loss of interest, feelings of worthlessness. Sometimes it's sleeplessness or sleeping all the time. You don't feel like you want to do anything. You're losing interest in things that you used to love. Like maybe you were really into gardening and then all of a sudden like you find no joy in gardening anymore. So depression just kind of takes these different modes. So we say it's sadness, but overall it's kind of this gradual withdrawal from everyday life that happens for many of reasons. Sometimes it's situational, something happens that triggers it. It could be the death of a loved one, and you have that natural occurrence of grief, but then there's things that go beyond that grief. So let's say we're 3 months in and the person is still experiencing that high level of grief, and it shifts to depression, as well as you can have it where it can be a brain function. So your brain is not producing enough like serotonin or norepinephrine or dopamine. I know I'm throwing out terms, but it can literally be a medical thing that is happening within your brain chemistry that keeps you from being able to experience the natural highs and lows of life. So you kind of stay at this just level lowness throughout your whole life. So I'm going to go ahead and let Vanessa take it from there.
No, that's pretty much what it is. I like what you said in the end, that it is a medical illness. And a lot of people don't realize that depression is not just sadness. This is a distortion in the brain chemistry. So it's something that's happening internally. So when you think of it, I always like to say to my clients or people that I talk to, I say, think of depression like it is a medical illness. And I said it to you guys just now, if you broke your arm, you will go to the emergency room. It's the same thing. If you are feeling that you're experiencing these symptoms that Erica just talked about, that persistent sadness and losing interest in things you used to, you want to probably call your family doctor and say, hey, I've been feeling a little bit different over the last couple of weeks. Can I just come in and talk with you to see what's going on? Because it is a clinical thing, and it's a medical illness.
And one of the things that I like that you guys both have pointed out, and I think someone asked a question along the lines, I think last week they said, how can you tell the difference between just temporary sadness, right, and depression? And I think you mentioned, Erica, you said you can have like a 2 weeks thing maybe, but then it could go away, right? But if it continues, then that's where maybe you should kind of be like, is that like a good time frame, you think? Like 2 weeks where somebody's saying,
so when you're looking at like a clinical diagnosis of depression, we're going to say, hey, so what have you been feeling X, Y, and Z for the past 2 weeks? So it's these feelings for a consecutive 2 weeks. Now you could have like something could trigger it. We all have our highs and lows. Sometimes we wake up and we're just like not in a great place. That's completely normal. We're just having a bad day. It's raining. It's dreary outside. And I'm just feeling really, really low. That doesn't mean you have depression. We all have those experiences of regular life highs and lows. And the next day comes or something good happens and you're able to kind of go back to life. Now, depression, this is something that is persistent. This is something that isn't going away. This is something that you're not able to shake. You're looking at 2 weeks going by and like, I'm still having a loss of energy. I'm still having these feelings of worthlessness. I'm getting to the point where like, I can't get out of bed in the morning, or I'm getting to the point where I'm restless all of the time. And I don't know what's going on. This isn't me feeling sad for 2 or 3 days or a couple hours. This is me feeling sad all the time. Not just sadness. It could be like me being irritable, me having like idealizations of like, I don't want to be on this earth anymore. These thoughts that are recurrent that you cannot shake. As Vanessa was saying, it is a medical diagnosis. So it's not something that goes away. And people, a lot of times we kind of like throw depression around, like, oh yeah, they're just depressed. They're just having some depression today. And depression is not something that you have just one day.
Yeah.
It is something that is consistently that you are battling and that you are fighting with. I always compare it to diabetes. Like when a person is diagnosed with diabetes, we know this is something that they're going to struggle with for the rest of their life. Depression is the exact same, more or less the exact same thing. Like you can go into remission with it. It can go away for a little while, but we know that they might still have those episodes in and throughout their lives. And with that, there comes certain treatments that need to be, sought out in order to manage those depressive episodes.
And I like what you said, Erica, the treatment, that it is treatable. So that's like a ray of hope that, even if you are diagnosed with clinical depression, it can be treated. And that treatment needs to come from a professional, someone like Erica or myself, or a psychiatrist, somebody who has experience in dealing with this type of illness. And a lot of time when you go to your family doctor and they suspect that it's depression, they do make a recommendation that you go and have therapy, because talk therapy does help. There are various techniques and tools and skills that a therapist can help you with, and it can help you to navigate and better manage the mood swings or the mood that comes along with the diagnosis of depression.
Oh, nice. And so I like a couple of things that you guys have mentioned, because it really does away with some of the maybe misconceptions that are out there, because you guys have said, hey, this is not just an emotion, it's not just a feeling, and like it needs to be treated, right? And so let's talk a little bit about that, because I want to ask you guys what you guys think, get your opinion on this, because this is still me learning. Would you say that maybe often there's a lot of people, more than we realize, or more than people in general realize, that they're dealing with depression, but maybe there are certain misconceptions or things that they thought, like maybe some people did think, oh, it's depression, but I'll get over it, I'll be okay, and they maybe do need to see someone? Or number two, let's talk about some misconceptions that are out there, either culturally, like, oh, you're weak if you admit that you're depressed, and you got to go talk to a counselor, or and I've heard these kind of conversations before for certain people. Or the other one could be like, hey, listen, and this is the Christian one, right? Oh, listen, Erica, you depressed, but you know what I'm saying, I'll be praying for you, and you pray, and you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You'll get over this. And let's talk. I want you guys to touch up on a little bit of some of these. Share with us your ideas, your thoughts on this, and how maybe this could be harmful, or if we don't do away with these or get to the real solution, it could lead to some other negative circumstances.
I like to think of it from the sense of myself being a Christian. I understand what it means to pray and believe in something bigger than yourself. I believe in God. So I understand what it means to have a relationship with God and believe in Him and trust Him. But I also understand that there are certain things that we experience as human beings that manifests itself in physical symptoms like depression or, sicknesses. But then because we believe in God, He connects us to the understanding that He has also inspired other people, because we are social beings. He has inspired other people who can help you on this journey to navigate and to get treatment and healing from whatever earthly or physical symptoms or sicknesses that you're experiencing. When it comes on to therapy and it comes on to Christians, I always say, I am not asking you to throw out your prayer life. I'm asking you to use your prayer life as a coping skill, because prayer can be a strong support system for you. Your church family can be a support for you. So you need all of that. And it can be a great benefit in your treatment plan. So it's just to have that realization that God is not, God is not asking you to neglect everything else and not seek treatment. He's also asking you to rely on Him, have faith, but also have faith that He has provided the help you need on this earth. That's
Amen.
how I
So
look at it.
yeah, and I love what you said. It can be a coping, it could help you, but it is not the only. If you're only seeing it as the solution, then there's you got to rethink that. Okay, Erica, is there something you wanted to add to that?
I think Vanessa hit the nail on the head when she said, like,
Do you
so
feel, Erica, that sometimes there's like maybe cultural misconceptions sometimes, like, oh, maybe sometimes it's, or just in general, right? Regardless of culture, background, even sometimes maybe I'm thinking from a man's perspective, oh, that's weak if you admit that you are depressed, or it's seen as a weakness to be seen emotionally. I mean, unstable is not the correct, but you get what I'm saying. Have you guys seen that? And maybe does that prevent some people from getting treatment and lead to further things? Or how can we maybe do away with some of these stigmas that are out there, or misconceptions?
absolutely. I feel like I see it all the time. I'm coming from like a very Black, very Christian family, as well as
Mm.
working in very high poverty, minority communities. Some of the first things that they'll say to me, they'd be like, "Yo, Miss Erica, I'm sad, but like I ain't depressed. I'm gonna be all right." Like
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah,
just, suck it up and I'm gonna keep walking,
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and my question is like, for how long, how long can you
Mm,
carry the weight of something and act like it's not there
Yeah.
before it crushes you? How
mm,
long can we do that for? And it's
mm,
these conceptions of, if I show emotion, then I'm showing weakness. So it's
mm,
almost pulling back the layer of, there's nothing weak about having an emotion. There's nothing weak about saying, hey, this is where I'm at and I need help in that setting. It actually takes all the strength in the world to say, hey, I need help for this. And I
Yeah.
think taking away the stigma of saying, oh, I'm struggling with something that's mental, because the thing about depression is that if we were walking around with like open sores all over our body, everybody would look at us and be like, oh my goodness, you have all these sores on your body. We need to get you to the hospital. You need to get help. And the thing
mm,
about depression is that we can't see it, but it's like these open sores in our mind that we're just putting to the side and saying, oh, we're not going to worry about them because people are going to think we're weak because we have them. So one of the ways
mm,
of overcoming them is saying, hey, you know what? This is beyond me.
Yeah.
This is something that is bigger than me, and that there is help and there is treatment for this situation. And I think when you take it away, as Vanessa was saying earlier, when you take it in a different form of depression, is just like walking around with like a broken arm. Like if I have a
mm,
broken arm, people are going to tell me, hey, you're going to need to go to the doctor for
And it
that.
hurts.
Depression
yeah,
yeah, it
mm,
hurts so bad that you have this pain, and we're not just going to keep walking around for weeks with this broken arm, where it's just going to get worse and worse and worse if you don't get help. Depression is the exact same thing. Something is broken, but it's not something that's so
mm,
broken that it can't be fixed. But what
Exactly.
happens is that when we don't fix broken things, is that they begin to harm other areas of our life. So then a person who was just struggling with depression at the beginning, it becomes anxiety. And then that anxiety seeps into their family structure. And then that family structure seeps into their everyday life. Now it's seeping into their work. So now on top of depression, they also have all these basic needs that aren't being met. So by the time they
mm,
get to us, their life is so much in shambles. They're like, I'm not sad, I need a job. But if we work on what was the problem and the foundation, which was the sadness, then we can build upon everything else. Because
Hmm.
mm,
it's okay to have the feelings that you're feeling. It's the issue of getting treated for those things so that we can get you to where you need to be. But first you
Yeah.
have to let go and say, like, this is okay. And I think just
mm,
the very simple thing is saying, hey, well, a lot of times what I do with some of my clients, I say, hey, this is okay. It's okay that we feel this way. It's okay that you're having these emotions. Everybody has these emotions. And sometimes it has to start so small. So sometimes just acknowledging that, I'm sad right now, or I'm frustrated, or I'm irritated, and I've been feeling this way for a while. I'm not going to call it depression, but I'm irritated. And then
Yeah.
we can go from there.
Yeah.
good, good. I love what you guys are saying, because not only are we doing away with some of these conceptions about it, whether culturally, even from a Christian worldview, but you guys have both said this, and this is important for our listeners to know, is that it is treatable. There
Mhm.
is a solution. Angie said, yes, so glad Vin said it is treatable. That's correct. It
Mhm.
is treatable, that you can overcome this. Is if you're
Mhm.
watching this, or if you know somebody who's going through it, or gone, or going through it, it is treatable, and they do need help. And I think I don't know if it was Vanessa, one of you guys said in the beginning, that it is not something that you can do on your own. Okay, that
Hmm.
you cannot pray away Okay, I mean, it can help, but you cannot do it on your own. And this is important. Now, as we talk about this, I want to talk about a couple more things, and we already have quite a bit of questions on here, people asking us. So we'll get to those in a little bit. I see Fia in the house, and Aileen is in the house, but we have a couple questions. We'll get to them, but I want to talk about a couple of things. One of them is, as we're mentioning, we're talking about some of the things. How are we able to tell? This is two questions where I'm going personally. And then somebody I just posted another good question. How are we able to tell if somebody else, right? If a friend thinks they have it, right? Or if I let's say a pastor, right? I get asked to go see somebody and they say, the person tells me, I think my son is depressed. Can you check on him or whatever? What are some symptoms that we can tell is not just your temporary week or 2 week sadness or, than actual depression? What are some ways we can spot it in someone else? Like good ways to spot it, we may not be able to be like a psychologist or a psychotherapist like you guys, but are there some good ways that we can be able to say, hey, you should go speak to someone?
Yeah, I think Erica, you touched on that when you gave the definition of what depression is. You list out some symptoms, and they're very easy to spot. But you can also get into self-diagnosing some of the times when you think of these things. But if we're thinking in general, what some of the symptoms are, Erica mentioned that it includes this persistent feeling of sadness that it goes over not just you feeling sad, but it starts to affect other areas of your life. For example, not coming out of bed for a long period of time, which is leading into you getting to work extremely late. Then it leads to you losing your job, and then now you're not able to pay your rent and stuff like that. So other areas of your life are being affected because of the physical symptom that you are experiencing. So loss of appetite also, or increased appetite. You also be sleeping excessively, or you're not sleeping at all. Racing thoughts. That's where you can't get a break from just a lot of things going on in your head, or you become extremely sensitive to certain things. Like, I've had clients who they say that they can tell that their depression is flaring up because they're extremely sensitive to the sunlight. And after talking to their doctors, their medical doctors, they couldn't find any medical or physical reasons as to why this is happening. And they trace it back to their depression, that this is a sign that shows that you are extremely sensitive to sunlight. It shows that the chemicals in your brain, there's an imbalance. So that's another thing to think about, the imbalance that's happening in the brain, which we can't see, but is happening. It also just feeling like excessively worthless or guilty. Not your random, I stole a candy from the shop and now I feel guilty. This is some significant guilt that's happening for a long period of time. And then you also think about the hopelessness that's associated with it. And then that feeling of loss that sometimes lead into suicidal ideation, or even sometimes the action of wanting to kill yourself, attempting to kill yourself numerous times. And the list can go on, because if you think about it, because of the chemical imbalance that happens inside our brain, it can also have varying physical changes in our body depending on your makeup too. So that's one thing to think about. It may not look the same for everyone, but these are some of the common symptoms.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So one of the things that I think go ahead, Erica. Go ahead.
Even with adolescents, because I work like a lot with them, sometimes it might not look like sadness. It might look like irritability
and anger.
They're angry all the time. Like, they're ready to throw chairs. They're curse you out. They don't want to be bothered. And I know that sounds like a normal adolescence, but like almost an abnormal behavior. So those are things to watch out too. That might be even something you might see in someone who's coming from a more, how I say, like masculine culture where sadness isn't okay. So usually the go-to emotion when sadness is not an okay emotion is that it comes out as anger. So when you see someone all of a sudden they're angry about everything, every little thing is getting to them. Every little thing is like, I'm blowing up at you. A lot of people are like, oh no, they have an anger management problem. But 9 times out of 10, they're struggling with depression. But since depression is not acceptable, what you're seeing is increased anger and explosion.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. That's a good point because, I'm thinking about myself personally, like coming from a Hispanic, Mexican American, and I was thinking personally we were talking about the whole misconception. Someone actually, a friend of mine actually who pastors or used to pastor in Canada, a good friend of mine asked on Facebook lately, man, do you allow yourself to cry? He posted that question on Facebook, right? And he was asking different men. He was just doing a little. And one of the things I said, yes. I said, but sometimes the machismo in me will want to shame me for it. And that was an honest answer. But then I have to remind myself, it's like, and I know we talked about this on Tuesday with Angie and Jessica, we have to do a self-awareness because I'll catch myself crying because of an emotional thing or whatever, like, tearing up. And then part of me wants to shame me for it. Like, oh, that's weak, man. How can you be crying? Like, man, if your boys saw you, they'd be like, oh, what's wrong with this dude? Why is he crying? But then I have to remind myself, like you said, it is okay. It's okay to do that. But I like what you're mentioning. I had not thought about that. If a culture hides or is shameful to cry, or to be sad, then it turns into anger. And I think that's one of the many things other people may experience without realizing it. One last question that I wanted to get personally, and then we're going to go into, we got a couple number of questions here that I want us to go to real quick. Judy's got a question. We're going to get to that, Jafia and Angie. And the last question I have for you guys is, during these times of, COVID-19, is there some ways that maybe it could be impacting people more or less, or they're feeling maybe like, it's coming on? And this is what I'm referring to as well, because it seems to me that sometimes depression could be hard to not find out if you have it or not. Because, and what I mean is, some of the symptoms can just vary. Like you guys said, you can sleep a lot or you're not sleeping. You can eat a lot or you're not eating. So that can be tricky. But I know one thing that I'm learning as I'm listening to you guys is that important, that I'm making a very good mental note, is that if this is happening, but if this happens, it's how long. If I look back and I'm like, okay, I haven't slept well, but it's not like it's just been a day or two. I haven't slept well in like more than 2 weeks. Then I got to start reevaluating and rethink, like, this is more than just me having a bad couple of weeks. This could very possibly be depression. So are there some things we need to be more aware of during this time where we're more isolated, we're at home with family more? Are there some things we could do to maybe prevent some? I don't even know. I'm just thinking for people that are at home more, I know some people are saying they're being affected more mentally by it. Any kind of advice you'd like to give to us?
I think it's important for us to pay attention to our body and also be very mindful of what our triggers are. And for those who aren't diagnosed with depression, and they may not necessarily know that they have a depression diagnosis, if that's the case, just pay attention to how you are responding to your environment. Think about the changes that are happening in your body and how that is affecting the way that you carry out your daily lives, because depression presents itself in physical symptoms a lot of times. So if you're realizing that there is a sudden change in your temperament, your mood, or even the way you feel, if you feel extremely or excessively tired, or if you're aware that there's been something happening in my personal life that's affecting the way I feel and think and carry out, behave, I may need to think about those things and see if it's carrying on for a longer period of time. Erica touched on it. It's not just grief. It's something that is more chronic than just your regular grieving. So being aware of your environment, your triggers, and also paying attention to your body, I feel like that's important during this time. And I know that because we are asked to social distance as best as we can, there are hotlines and there are medical centers that you can make a phone call to, and you can tell them, describe what's going on, and then they can direct you as to what's the next best step to do, make recommendations, or they may ask you to book an appointment with your family doctor so that you can go talk to someone in person. Because sometimes with depression, you are prescribed medication. And if that's the case and you need that form of support, they will direct you as needed.
Mm-hmm. And the important thing, especially when we're in this pandemic state that is so like atypical and such an anomaly for our generation and the generations before us, it's something no one has ever experienced before. It's important to know that like depression can be triggered, as much as it is biological and as much as it is, something that's going on with our brain chemistry, that it also can be circumstantial. And when you're at home for long periods of time and you're with your own thoughts, and there's the risk of losing your job or losing employment, or maybe your at-home situation isn't the best, and now you find yourself kind of in this place where you're developing these feelings of hopelessness. And we've been home now for almost 5-6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing that this isn't being shaken. I'm not able to sleep at night. I'm waking up at all times, and I'm eating all the time. I'm not eating at all. I'm consistently scared. I'm irritable. I have questions about, I don't find joy in things. I used to play the piano, when I came home from work, and now I'm not playing that anymore. I don't find joy in the simple things. I used to and when COVID first started, I was video chatting with people in my family once a week. And now, like when they call me, I ignore their calls. So being aware of changes in ourselves, that sometimes we'll try to be like, oh, just do you live your life, but being aware how consistent those things are, because depression definitely can be triggered by circumstances. And being in a situation that is calling for isolation, when, for me, coming from a Christian standpoint, we're built for community and interaction, introvert, extrovert, whatever that is, we're still at some point built to be around others. It can trigger those feelings of depression that can come in and create a more clinical situation than was there previously because of the circumstances that we're in currently.
Mm-hmm. And I also think about, Erica, and for those listening, we talk about introverts and extroverts, we talk about the way that we, receive our energy. When you think about persons who are introverts, a lot of people are saying, well, the introverts are okay right now. They're loving this. It might not be the case. This might be a little bit excessive for them. You know what I mean? So check in on your introversion friends and also check in on your extroverted friends, because these are people who get their energy from interacting from other people. So now that we are social distancing, that can be a trigger for a lot of people. And sometimes with depression, or not just depression, but sometimes we are, as people, we sometimes internalize our thoughts a whole lot, and this whole social distancing is not helping. We are forced to be with our thoughts a whole lot more, and for some people it is difficult to be left alone with their thoughts because it's so hard for them to process. So this can also be something that can be a triggering event for someone, being isolated and being left alone with their thoughts. And if you bring trauma into the mix, someone who has been masking their trauma for a very long time, and now they have no other outlet or way to get out whatever they're feeling, this is going to be a difficult time for them. And they move from having PTSD to having severe depression. So there's a lot that goes on to this whole isolating at this point.
Good. Thank you, guys. Wow. Awesome advice, guys. And in case you just tuned in and you're like, oh, I feel like I missed it, keep in mind this is going to be recorded on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. I know from last week, 2 days ago when we did our last one, other people watched it later on and commented how helpful it was. So you can, if you missed some of it, you want to go back and watch the beginning, because we covered a lot of good things on here. We're going to go into some of the questions here. Alyssa's asking the following questions, and you talked about this a little bit, Vanessa, like if you get recommended, to go see somebody. Alyssa asked the following question: what recommendations do you have for selecting a therapist that is right for you? What recommendations do you have for selecting a therapist that is right for you?
You want to go, Erica?
I'll jump off that cliff. And this one is, I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of a hard one, I guess, because I am a therapist.
Yeah.
And like
Come see me.
you honestly just have to find one that works for you.
Yeah.
So it might take a little bit of time. Like there are sites like Psychology Today, which are going to give you a little bit of inserts about each therapist. You can go to their site, see what they focus on. But more so than anything, it's really finding someone that you can I hate to say vibe with, but feel like you can develop a relationship with, because therapy is relational. If there's no relationship, there's no change.
That's
So
true.
it's okay if you go to a therapist 1 or 2 times and you're like, ooh, there's something about them. I'm not really feeling great. I'm gonna find someone else. Now, don't use that as an excuse to just never go to therapy, guys, because there are gonna be moments in therapy where you're going to be made to feel uncomfortable, because uncomfortability equals change. But that's a difference than being uncomfortable and then feeling like, well, I'm in a place where like this just isn't working at all. It's the same when you go to a medical doctor. We have some doctors who are like, ooh, I'm just not really feeling this doctor, so I'm gonna go ahead and go somewhere else. So talk to your friends, talk to your families, people you trust, people you go to school with, mentors, people at church. Talk to the people pastors who you trust and value, who you feel safe to talk with them about in this environment, and seek out their advice and their guidance, as well as just kind of doing some of your own research into what you feel like would be the best. And I want to say, call some of the therapist offices as well,
Yeah.
and be like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. Do you feel like you have somebody who would vibe well with me? You don't have to say vibe, but who would work well with me? And from working at many different like practices, because I'm out of control and I work all the time, they're going to be very, very honest with you. And they will refer you to a clinician in their practice who they feel like will work best with you. So sometimes it's trial and error, but more so talk to the people who you know and who you trust, as well as talk to the medical professionals directly.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Vanessa.
I was just going to say it's important to also make a list of your needs and what you're really looking for, because if you do go on Psychology Today, you want to know what exactly you want. So they will tell you exactly if they have a specialty. If you are dealing with trauma, you want to probably ask them if they have experience in working with people who have, severe trauma and stuff like that. So make a physical note of what you would want to bring to therapy, and ask them, is this something that you think you can deal with? Because it's about you, and you want to make sure that your needs are being met to the best as possible.
Good. One last question, tagging on to Alyssa. Does it matter if it is a Christian therapist, Christian or not? Or, I get this question even myself a lot. Oh, it has to be, some parents or some people in general, or married couples. Oh, it has to be Christian. Touch on that just briefly.
I think it depends. I think it depends on you as a person and where you are coming from. If you are new to therapy, and if you feel as though you can only connect with somebody at this time who identifies with you from a religious standpoint, go for that. But I also want to put it out there. There are a lot of therapists who are practicing, but they don't go under the banner of Christian therapy. And that's because they want to make sure that they are also getting to people who may not have an idea of what Christian therapy is, but they just understand what plain old therapy means. So that's something to consider too. When you're talking to a therapist, you feel free to say, I am a Christian. I want to know if you would feel okay in incorporating some Christian perspective and techniques into the therapy session. And as a therapist, they will tell you yes or no. I'm a Christian, but I don't label myself as a Christian therapist. But when clients come to me and they say, I'm a Christian, I ask them, will it be okay if we explore some Christian tenets into our therapy? And they're like, yes. So it's good to have that conversation, and it's good to have that mindset that not because somebody doesn't label themselves as Christian therapist doesn't mean that they're not willing to have therapy from a Christian perspective.
That's good, and it goes along with what Erica was saying. Finding someone that's comfortable, that you're comfortable with, and that therapist is not looking to change your religion or your theology. they want to help you mentally, and that could be also using spiritual, like you said. You ask your patient, they're like, yeah, that'd be awesome, great. I just wanted to ask that because I get that often, like so it has to deal with the person and what they're comfortable with. Next question here from my homie Jay Fia. He says, how do we talk about depression better? What terms or phrases should we avoid and or use? What are some things that we need to avoid to use, and how do we talk about depression better?
I think when talking about depression, I think this is like an awesome question. I think when talking about depression, one of the most important things, which is why I said it first, is like this is like the number one disability in the world, is normalizing it. I think a lot of people feel like I'm the only one and I'm the only one in my culture and we don't do this in church and nobody else feels this way. And the fact that I'm feeling this way is so overwhelming and it can't be me. So it's not me. So I'm going to ignore it. So I think normalizing the fact that like, people deal with this all of the time. So at the same time as you're normalizing it, also not acting like that it's nothing. You know, like the sadness you felt yesterday, Wednesday, that you got over, saying a person who might be experiencing depression for, you know, the past 6 months that, oh, you'll just get over it. This will go away. You know, there's a difference between saying, hey, you know, there are so many people who are experiencing this and saying, oh, you'll get over this. I went through that yesterday. You'll be just fine. So I think coming from that perspective of, I want to say we're all in this together, but in the sense that like we're all in this together and you're not alone in the boat, that helps people to kind of open up. When I know that like there are other people who are experiencing what I'm experiencing, it feels like there's more hope for me to be able to get better. It feels like I'm not alone. And if I'm not alone, then I'm not afraid to reach out for help. It's when I feel like I'm alone that I'm afraid to reach out for help because I feel like I'll be rejected or I'll be stigmatized because of it. So kind of taking away the stigma. So when somebody's coming up to you, you notice that there's a change going in there. There's nothing wrong with walking up to them and saying, hey, you know, I've seen something happening that's been a little different in you. Can we talk about it? You know, are you open to have a conversation about it? And I think just starting the simple living room talk with them, not being like, oh, you have depression, I think, but just simply saying, hey, I've seen a change and I want to know if you're open to talk about it because you don't seem like yourself lately. And I noticed it's been happening for quite a while. So I would just love to, you know, sit down and have a heart to heart with you. Because a lot of times when people have depression, one of the biggest things is being able to have the conversation to say, I'm glad somebody saw it. I hadn't felt like myself. And it opens the door for everything else. So normalizing it in a sense where you're not afraid to address it, but also not addressing it in a stigmatizing way and minimizing it. I know that's a lot, but yeah.
No. And maybe sometimes some people are afraid to normalize or talk about it because they feel that they may be judged or look down upon, like, oh, just pray about it. And that was the one I was going to say. Don't tell people, you know, those of you who are watching, if you're Christian, be like, oh, you know, I'll pray for you. Like, yeah, you can, but like do it, but don't mention it as a solution. That's not good. You know? That can't be the only solution, and that doesn't help the person feel better at that moment. You know, like I love what you're saying. Hey, would you like to talk about it and just have someone listen to you? Nice, awesome. Next one here. Judy is asking, and this is actually a question I was having too. You guys talked about, you know, different situations bring about, you know, depression, but Judy is asking, can depression be genetic? Depression be genetic?
Absolutely. Depression could absolutely be genetic. Actually, some of the biggest precursors is like, oh, your mom experienced depression? Oh yeah. And a lot of times what happens is that culturally, what I have seen even in my own family is that recently I had a sister who had like a major depressive episode and my mom was kind of like, oh yeah, you know, my aunt experienced that, but we didn't call it that. We called it something else. You know, and then I kind of dealt with that, but we called it something. We just thought she was like a little off. You know?
She needed Jesus.
We thought she needed some Jesus. You know? But depression can absolutely be genetic. And it's something, and I would say like if you yourself, you know, have struggled with depression or major depressive episodes, your parent, don't be afraid to have that conversation with the family, to normalize it up front. Hey, I've struggled with this in the past. I've struggled with sadness. I've struggled with the loss of energy and worthlessness and suicidal ideation. And it's not to scare you, but it's to let you know that if this does happen to you, it's not uncommon and we can work together to fix it. There are treatments for it. So I think like busting a door open on depression and the fact that like it can run through our families is something that will be really helpful with healing kind of like the dysfunction that we kind of been seeing for so many years because there's so much stigma behind it.
Angie asked the following question. We may have touched on it briefly, if not, we can touch on it again. How can a family or friend support someone who is experiencing depression and may not be aware of it?
I think like what Erica said, just being supportive and having that initial conversation of, hey, you don't seem yourself lately, and I'm just checking in, just a quick check-in, like, hey, I saw an interaction today and I just wanted to check in to see how things are going, that conversation. And also just being real with people and making your spaces a safe space. For example, if someone with depression sees you in a crowd of people who are talking bad about people with mental illness, they're not going to feel safe to come and talk to you about what they're struggling with. So you want to debunk some of those things in your conversations in public or even in your home. When people are talking craziness about mental illness and the stigma, break it up. Like, hey, that's not, we don't do that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yes.
Because people who need the support, they're watching and they're seeing our interactions. And we want to create safe spaces so that people can have these conversations with us. And we can then say to them, you know what? I am not an expert on dealing with this, but I can walk with you to the clinic so you can talk to a doctor. And that's where it starts. Simple and easy.
And if you're just tuning in, and if you're wanting more and you're like, hey, like I said, and I said this early, this is being recorded. It's going to stay on our YouTube page, our Facebook page. If you know of someone, hey, listen, the reason we're doing these talks is because we believe it's very important and it can help many people. So your questions and the answers we're giving are very important because it could save a person. We mentioned suicide and even some simple little things as like downplaying, like Vanessa said, or, oh, no, that's weak. Yeah, put a stop to it, put an end to it, or encourage someone and maybe have them watch this video with you or go walk with them because this is very, very important. All right, we got Carl in the house. Carl Cunningham is, here to support.
Repping his woman.
You supporting him at church, so he's coming in here to support. So
I appreciate it.
He's showing some love here. So he says, is there a difference between depression and mere sadness? Is there a difference between depression and mere sadness?
Yeah. Yeah, we touched on that, right, Erica? We were saying that you have to think about the time frame and the length of time, the persistentness of that sadness, and how it manifests itself. Like, is the sadness just leading to you just feeling sad because outside looks gloomy, or is that sadness happening for a long period of time that's leading to you not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to do anything else, not wanting to go to work? If it's interrupting your natural cycle of your functioning, your daily life, then that's something that you want to check on, because that's not just mere sadness.
Awesome. So if it's a continuation, then you got to really consider something else. And Alyssa posted on here some really good sources: Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK. So there's also a website, suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Guys, feel free to look at those up. If one of you guys actually know somebody or you yourself is personally going, there's another website Alyssa posted, samhsa.gov, find treatment. And let's go to the next question. We got a couple more, man. I think people are really enjoying this and getting into this. Angie says, sometimes people are afraid to seek professional help because they think they will get taken away. Okay. Can they touch on the process for someone who is experiencing depression and may have suicidal thoughts? What is the first step in getting help?
Absolutely. And I'm going to go back to kind of talking to someone about it. And we're going to touch on like taking away. When I say taking away, I think she's going on the instance of being like institutionalized, or, you sometimes when you have suicidal ideation and there is a intent, there is a plan, they're going to do that tonight, then there are certain steps that have to be taken. However, usually when there's suicidal ideation and they're with a therapist or even a family friend, talking about it is usually the first step. to saying, hey, have you been experiencing suicidal thoughts? 9 times out of 10, a person desires for someone to open up and ask them if they are experiencing these suicidal thoughts. And the most important thing to know is that it's okay to talk to somebody about suicide, because 9 times out of 10, a person nobody wants to kill themselves. What they want to happen is they want the pain to stop. So therefore, there is no concern about being taken away. It's just, how do we deal with the pressure that you're feeling that is so overwhelming that you're willing to take your own life to get out of it? So once we get there, we can take the next steps. So once you talk about it, I wouldn't advise anyone, if you feel like a person is truly at risk, after you talk to them, to just leave them there. But to get like that help, to have the suicide hotline that Alyssa just put into the comments, call them, get help. There's nothing wrong with going even to a hospital and saying, hey, I'm having these thoughts, and I just want to know if you will like inpatient me for the evening or do an intake with me. And 9 times out of 10, what happens in that intake process is that a therapist on site will come and they will talk to you and they will assess you and they'll talk you through it to a point where it brings you back to almost, I hate to say a point of reality, but a point of not being as overwhelmed, a point of stability. So nobody wants to take you away. They want to help you understand what you're feeling and be able to navigate that emotion so that you're not a danger to yourself.
Yeah. And, I've worked in a treatment center before where I've had clients who've been unstable to the point where they wanted to hurt themselves. And when we take them to the hospital, I tell you, those nurses and doctors, they are super nice. And you're like, you feel so comfortable. And the patient feels comfortable in knowing that I was going through something very difficult and I came to this place and these people saw me as a person, not a sickness. And they just gave me the best quality of care possible. And, that's the stigma that we think of whenever you go to the hospital. If there is a situation of wanting to hurt yourself, that is going to be this chaotic or people being in your business. It's not like that. You are treated with respect and you are treated with autonomy. They give you the right to make your decision, but they're there for extra support and to make sure that you are stable and able to re-enter into your society and your community. So that's a part about it that I want people to understand. If it comes to that point where you need that type of support, hospitalization, don't be afraid. You will be taken care of. They're great.
And it's almost like we carry the stigmas with us. Like you talked about, Erica, like, oh, if someone's feeling suicidal, talk to them about it. I used to think this before, like, hey, no, man, don't bring it up. It's going to make them think more of it and they're going to be willing to do it. And that's a stigma itself. That's no, it's not the case. It's the opposite. Talk to them, hear them out. And then the other one, it's almost like what you were mentioning, Vanessa, is that we may take the stigma with us, like, oh, but if I go to the hospital, they're going to look at me like I'm some freak or some crazy person. But in reality, they're, like you said, they're looking to help you, and it's actually a benefit to do it. Let's see. Next question is Alicia. Oh, my sister tuned in. She's watching. How do you talk about depression in your family when you aren't used to talking about your emotions? And this is very true of my family. I can definitely attest to this. How do you talk about depression in your family when you aren't used to talking about it, your emotions?
Normalizing feelings and emotions. Don't let it be such a heavy topic. And talk about experiences that leads to various feelings and thoughts. We think about the ideal when people sit at the dinner table and they say, how was your day today? Instead of just listening or asking for the events in your day, talk about how certain events made you feel. You know what I mean? So somebody said today, a kid say, today somebody hit me in the shoulder. Say, how did that make you feel? And listen for that feedback and build conversation from that. So we're not saying, oh, let's talk about mental health today, because that's a very heavy topic for people who aren't used to talking about it. So intertwining it into your day-to-day conversations and having follow-up discussions about it.
Yes, absolutely. And utilize yourself. Bring yourself, when you maybe come from a family where like, oh, I don't feel any emotions. I'm stable all the time. I'm living my best life and I'm in my best self. at every time of the day. Sometimes when they're just talking about their day to day, you can just interject, man, that happened to you today? That would make me really upset if that happened to you. Oh, man, that happened. If that would have happened to me, I would have been so sad. Let me tell you about a sad experience. So sometimes what people need before they can feel comfortable talking about their emotion, they need to see somebody else doing it and someone projecting that emotion of that feeling onto the circumstance. Because what might happen is just like, oh, this frustration that they're experiencing was like, oh, man, I would have been sad about that. And they might stop and be like, man, yeah, that did hurt my feelings a little bit. Maybe I wasn't mad. Maybe I was hurt a little. You're like, yeah, maybe you were. So sometimes using it when we feel strong enough to talk about our emotions and we see that a lot of our families aren't in a place where they're really ready to confront that. Sometimes us just normalizing that, hey, you experienced this situation and man, that was a really hard situation to experience. And not even putting on yourself, man, if I was you at that age, at that time, that would have been really hard for me to go through. How did you make it through that? You know? So therefore, they're almost talking around the emotion and not saying, oh, I felt this way, I felt scared. But man, for me, it was like this and this to go through. So it's creating a safe space where people can navigate those emotions, sometimes without giving it words, in a way that's safe for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just takes one person to open up and break down some of the stigmas and stereotypes in the family to see it. We're going a little bit over time, but it's okay. It seems like people are enjoying it because they're asking a lot of questions. We got 2 more questions, all right? And then we'll wrap it up. So thank you guys. The next question is by Carolina, and she says, how do you tell the difference between a bipolar person or a depressed one? Can you tell the difference between a bipolar or a depressed person?
So bipolar, these are oscillating symptoms for the most part. There's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. But telltale trait of bipolar is those hypomanic episodes. So when someone has bipolar, they do have like a major depressive episode. They have multiple major depressive episodes where they get really low and you might be like, oh, that might just be depression. But they also have these hypomanic episodes. So when I say a hypomanic, you're probably like, what is a hypomanic episode, Erica? What are you talking about? So a hypomanic episode is kind of like sometimes you'll see them on TV and they're like, making 1,000,000 sandwiches all at once, or they're building like these super tall car towers, or they're just doing something. They're moving super duper quickly and just super hyper focused on something, and they're doing it. Usually, you can tell a person's in a hypomanic episode because like you can't keep up with them for 5 minutes. They're just going. So that's the difference between depression. Doesn't have that. Depression, there's no symptom that says, oh, they're super hyperactive and they're going to go super quick and be super hyper focused. No, that's the opposite of depression. So bipolar has both. They have the I'm hyper fast, and it has the I'm just down. I'm just down. I can't focus. I can't get my mind. I can't get out of this worthlessness. Depression is just those feelings of worthlessness, just those feelings of hopelessness, just those feelings kind of irritability, of not being able to come out of that sadness. It's that low where you kind of can't get yourself to move, not where you're moving so quick.
Judy asked a question: how do you identify depression in small children? How do you identify depression in small children?
I think a lot of time it presents itself in aggressive behaviors. That's that, and it also depends on if a child is able to verbalize and what stage of development they are at. If this is a young kid, you might see a lot of physical aggressive behaviors like acting out or extreme irritability. In older kids too, you might see increase in rebellion outside of teenagers rebelling, but it's an increase like going against the rules of the house, or avoiding, or internalizing a whole lot, isolating. And it also, you see a lot of aggression too. I feel like aggression is very common in children that have been diagnosed with depression. And I think it also has a whole lot to do with the ability to cycle through different forms of emotion. And anger is sometimes the easiest form of emotion that is displayed. And that's what we see presented a whole lot of the time.
So would this anger be something that like it's all the time? Because see, this is what I'm asking. This is a good question, and I love your answer. But for example, I got a toddler right at home, and sometimes when he's tired, when it's like nap time, most of the time he's a decent kid. He's whatever, and yeah, he's going through the terrible twos where he tells me no now. He thinks he's grown and he needs to go get a job and buy his own diapers. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
right before nap time, if I notice he gets a little cranky, right?
Uh-huh.
And he starts like throwing like aggressiveness or whatever. But what's the difference? Like obviously in my mind, I'm like, okay, I have to remind myself sometimes, homie just needs a little nap right now. But how is that? Like, how can I tell the difference between that? Because some of the things you touched up, I could definitely see. The reason I'm asking is, I don't want some parents to think like, as I was thinking right now, I was, oh man, is my kid depressed? But
Oh no.
sometimes there's those stages, right? But
Yeah.
would you say then it has to be like a continuous, like it's like happening more than your average, more than just this is nap time and I haven't gotten to take a nap and he's aggressive, but now he's doing this like every day, like 24/7.
Which is why I said the stage of development, because a toddlers are going to throw tantrum. Toddlers are going to have meltdown. So we want to take those things into consideration. So for a little toddler, oh, poor Mateo, sweetheart. No, he is just being a toddler. But, we talk about like probably in kids, age, let's say 8 and over, when we see these behaviors, we also want to think about experiences too. You want to think about what has happened in my kid's life that probably lead to some of these behaviors or these symptoms. And it's not just your regular aggression. It's like severe aggression, property disruption. We're talking like getting into fights you can't really pinpoint what's the reason for the fight, and that's where the increased irritability comes in. They're just so irritable all the time, and the trigger can be anything good or bad that triggers them into this stage, state. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. It's been really good to have you guys and share with us. Great questions. Thank you guys for joining us and watching, tuning in. Like I said, you can rewatch this is on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. And I want to thank Erica. I want to thank Vanessa. I know you guys are busy. You got your Zoom meetings, got your jobs, got, church life and all this to take care of. So appreciate you guys. Obviously, miss seeing you guys around Berrien Springs, going to La Perla. We'll have to make that reunion happen. We'll have to make that and have some life-changing tacos, right, Erica?
Yes.
Well, thank you guys. Once again, thank you. Let me pray with you guys. And I want to pray for all of you guys watching. And as I do the prayers, I'm thinking, if you guys can think, and this is the last thing I'll ask of you guys, of a book. If somebody's thinking, man, I want to upon this. What's a good book that you recommend to the average person to read when it comes to maybe depression? What's a good self-help book or and obviously outside of the Bible? I want you to think about that and maybe you can share that with us. Let's pray and then give you some time. Holy Spirit will speak to you and give us a good book. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for Erica, Vanessa, and ask for a special blessing over them, their jobs and the changes and the blessing they get to be on people, helping them overcome mental obstacles that can not just only help them to feel free, but help them grow in their spiritual, mental life, Lord. So I ask for a special blessing over them. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us this time. And I ask for everyone who's watching, everyone who tuned in, the questions that were asked, Lord, may this help many people not just be free from certain things, but also be closer to you. That is our desire. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so we got Angie saying, thank you. Love this conversation. Shout out to Van and Eric. Any good book that you guys recommend? I see Vanessa already getting
I might leave that to Vanessa because I am not sure off like the top of my head. Right. I'm gonna open my Kindle real fast.
So
we got in there.
I have a couple books that I'm reading, but I really like this one. It's called The Perfection Detox. Tame your inner critic, live bravely, and unleash your joy. Looks something like this.
That looks awesome.
It is a pretty awesome book. The author is Petra Kohlberg, and I like the way she really goes through the nuances of life and how certain things can just throw us off our game and the different perspective. There's also like a Christian perspective that I don't even think she deliberately wanted to put it that way, but it came out that way, which is good for people who like to read more Christian-based books.
Mhm.
And like for kids who struggle with expressing their emotions or managing their emotions, there's this book that I usually use in my practice. It's called Rage, and it's a compilation of teenagers between the ages of 12 and 18 who have volunteered their stories about how they have they overcame their aggressive behaviors and their internal hatred for themselves, and they just share their stories, and these are awesome stories. And it also, at the end of it, you have the clinician coming in and just sharing some points on how teenagers can use different sources to manage their feelings and emotions. I think I have it, but I can't find it. It's called Rage. That's what it's
Great.
called.
In the other book, I'm typing it in the comments so people can if they want to look them up. The Perfect Detox, right?
Yeah,
And
the
Perfection. The
perfection
perfection.
detox.
the Perfection Detox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what's the author's name on that one?
Petra Kohlberg.
I bet. All right, awesome. I'm writing it on the comments there so people can look at them later on. Thank you guys once again. God bless. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you guys for
Thanks
tuning
for
in.
having us, Ray.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, God bless, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
too.
everyone.
Bye.